So, why do you feel stuck in pentatonic purgatory? So that right there, what I was just playing through, that was all pentatonic scale, but it didn't sound like your typical, right? Like it sounded a little more musical. So what I'd like to talk about is why I think a lot of people get stuck in that pentatonic purgatory. And what it has to do with is it has to do with memorizing shapes on the fretboard rather than being able to see the music on the fretboard. See, as guitar players, the easiest way for us to learn chords and to learn scales is to memorize the shape. So one of the first scales that we learn is the A minor pentatonic scale. And we learn it as, this literal box, this literal shape on the fretboard. And the thing is that this shape of the scale on the fretboard, it has very little to do with the way that the music actually sounds. And being able to develop a musical perspective on the notes that we play on the fretboard is a very, very important step to actually becoming musical. It's a very simple concept and it's a very difficult thing to do, but if you want to play more musically, we have to have more of a musical perspective on the notes that we're playing. So one of the things that I do with my students is instead of learning things across all 6 strings right from the beginning, we can learn the principles of something across just 1 string, and that really helps us see the fundamentals. For example, with our A minor pentatonic scale, you might want to learn how to play it on just 1 string. And what that looks like is that looks like this. And we can go back down, descending as well. And once you can see it on 1 string, and then once you know what the names of the notes are, so we have an A, a C, a D, an E, a G, and then an A. And then we want to start to be able to see what the scale degrees are as well. So first off, the first note that we play is the root of the scale. And then getting into the rest of them, that would take a little too much time for this video in particular. But the way that you would do that is you would basically figure out the minor scale first. And then you would understand that the pentatonic scale is just the minor scale, but missing 2 notes. And then you would have to know which notes are missing, so on and so forth. A little bit outside of the scope of this video. But once you understand how to play a minor pentatonic scale on just 1 string, you can start to see the relationship between those notes. And you can start to see the distances between those notes. And it's really the distance between notes, that's where the sound and that's where the color of music comes from. Now, with the guitar, we don't just have 1 string, we have multiple strings. And what that allows us to do is it allows us to keep our hand in the same position, but change pitch, right? So instead of having to jump all the way up the neck of the guitar every time we want to go up in pitch, we can just go across strings. That's literally what's going on when we're changing strings, is it's helping us keep our hand in the same position, but change a significant amount of pitch. And just very quickly, what is pitch? Pitch is basically the frequency of the note. So something low in pitch would be like the low E string. That's the lowest pitch note we have. The highest pitch would be the highest fret on the high E string, which depending on how many frets you have, it would be a different note. Mine happens to be a D. Then we can bend it to an E. Anyway, back to the task on hand. Once you can play a scale, it doesn't have to be just the minor pentatonic scale. That's the one we're talking about today, but it could be any scale. Once you can play that scale on 1 string, now you want to be able to play that scale across 2 strings. And And same as before, we want to be able to see the names of the notes, right? So A, C, D, and E. And to be able to have that understanding that the D and E from over here, that's what's switching over to the A string. Same exact notes. And being able to see how, okay, that's, all right, we're going from 1 string to 2 strings. Okay, that makes sense. Now the next step is to go to 3 strings. And again, being able to see the names of the notes. So A, C, D, E, G, A. And now we have another A. That's another root. The root is super important, understanding where your roots are. All of the roots, not just one of them. You want to understand every time you play the root, because that's the note that all the other notes typically are trying to resolve to. So you want to know where every single one of your roots are. You want to get to the point where you know what all the notes are and the names of the notes and their scale degrees. But starting with the root, that's like the most important one. So after you're good with 3 strings, then you can graduate to 4 strings. And again, this isn't just being able to play it across 4 strings. Playing it across 4 strings is easy. But do you know the notes? Do you know that this is a C? Do you know that this is a G? Do you know that this is an E? And can you know that instantly? If it takes you a second to figure it out, then the band has already moved on to the next chord and you're already too late. So we need to make this knowledge practical and instant. And then once you understand the names of the notes, then you have to understand what the scale degrees are. So when you want to play the minor third, you can do that. Because when we hear music and we hear a melody that we want to play, we're hearing it as music, like the minor third, the fifth, the seventh, the root. Like that's the way that we hear music in our head, is we hear it musically. But our relationship with the fretboard is so ingrained in these boxes and these shapes because that's the easiest way for us to learn how to play at the very beginning. And this is the plight of the intermediate guitar player, is making this transition from just seeing the fretboard in shapes and just seeing the fretboard in tablature to being able to see the fretboard in actual musical terms. And why is this important? Because that's how we hear music. We hear music in musical terms. So if you want to produce something that sounds good, you have to have a relationship with your instrument that is musical. At least this is my opinion. This is what's been really helpful for me. Sometimes you might come across like some useful hacks where people are like, sing while you're playing, and that'll help you sound more vocal. Or they'll say, you know, make sure to add more space in your solos so that you're not just playing notes all the time and you have more space of not playing. And these little tips and tricks are helpful, but at the end of the day, a hack is only going to get you so far. What I found for myself and what I found for my students is if you really want to take this seriously and you really want to make actual progress and get the most out of your practice time, is it's really important to build this solid foundation of understanding the music. Sorry, I'm trying not to blabber on too much. After we're good with 4 strings, then you can graduate to 5 strings, and then eventually 6 strings. And then you can repeat that process for your other positions as well. And I would recommend that when you're going through to other positions, always start with the root. So if you're up here, instead of starting on the 3rd, which if you didn't even know that that shape started on the 3rd of the scale, then we shouldn't at all be dealing with any of it, right? You actually want to start on the root. And you want to know where that root is. And you want to start on the root and practice your scale. End on the root so you know where that root is. Then you can go above, return to the root, go back down, and then go underneath, and then return return to the root. That way we're always starting and ending on the root so that we can hear it really well in context. Otherwise, it just sounds like a bunch of random notes. And if it sounds like a bunch of random notes to you, then when you try to use those random notes, your solo is just going to sound like a bunch of random notes. If you want to have intentionality in your playing and be able to express yourself in a musical way, the only way that I know how to do that is to build this solid foundation of understanding where we can really see the musical concepts on the fretboard. Now, here's the thing, is that most people just aren't willing to do that. It takes a lot of time, takes a lot of effort, takes a lot of study, takes a lot of practice. But if you're here and you're watching these videos and this channel, then you are the kind of person that's willing to put that time in. And you're also the kind of person that wants to make the most of the time that you have. So make sure that you find a plan that's really going to help you, because there are a lot of bad plans out there that can lead to wasting a lot of time in your practicing. But yes, going back to the subject of the video, the reason that you probably feel like you're stuck in pentatonic purgatory is because you have this shapes-based relationship with your chords and your scales. So you need to understand how scales are constructed, and you also need to understand how the names of the notes and the scale degrees, how you can see that with the shapes, because the shapes are helpful. Like, we're always going to be dealing with the fretboard, so I'm not telling you to forget about the shapes entirely. It's just that we need to be able to have our kind of guitar-centric view and the musical view, and how to marry those two things together. This is something that all of the greatest guitarists have done, and it's something that I'm continuing to work on every day, and I wish you well in your journey as well. All right, thanks for hanging out with me, and I'll see you in the next video.